Hello YouTube and welcome back to part number 3 of this 3-part video series on the Einhell cordless benchtop, tabletop, job site style table saw. 36 volt, as in 2 batteries go inside and off you go, no faff with cables. And this happens to be the cheapest one on the internet. Now in part number 1, if you haven't checked it out just yet, up there is where we do the unboxing video and an initial sort of review. In part number 2, up there, is a setup video. So for those of you who actually do commit to buying one of these or who already have one of these, and the same goes for the GCB corded version of the same model, as in the one that you can buy on the German Amazons. I put a picture here, which is exactly the same saw as this one, apart from the fact that the other ones don't use batteries, this one does, so the rest of it is all identical. And the same goes for the Excel spreadsheet, or whatever it's called, table saw. Spreading cheats. Could be a thing. Anyway, interesting marketing choice there for the brand Excel, eh? But anyway, I digress. That's exactly the same model as well. I believe even the paint job is the same color red as this one. So any of those saws, if you want to know how it's put together, or if you have to replace parts on it, or you just want to stay tuned in this exciting video to see how good it is build quality wise, then we'll get cracking now, because this is a very big saw. We don't do a lot of waffling, we get straight into it. So let's start by removing all the accessories, as in the dust cover, the fence arrangement, the push stick and the mitre gauge slidey thing. That basically comes with it, and we'll put that to the side. We'll review that right at the end. And let's start with the saw itself. So that's easy, that comes off straight away. That's just one fastener. We'll put these things, as I said, on the side for now. The fence comes off by just simply undoing the latching mechanism that locks it in place. And then that's your fence removed. Now the push stick just slides out. There's a little holster for it with a positive detent on it, so that just clips in place. That comes out very easily. And then the mitre gauge guide, parallel sliding arrangement, whatever the proper name for it would be, just pops out like so. So again, we'll put these on the side for now, and then we'll have a look at them later. What you're left with is a bare saw. Obviously, before you start taking it apart and turn this thing by accident into a meat slicer, take out the batteries. So then we do the saw blade, remove the cover, take the saw blade out, so that we at least don't cut ourselves on it, because teeth on it are a little bit sharp. So let's do that. Spanners for it you can find underneath the saw, right there. Just undo the wing nut and the spanners come right off. If you watch part 1 of this video series, you already knew this bit, but for those of you who haven't, there you go. And then to remove the cover, you can use a screwdriver or the small end of the spanner, and then just lift it. Now I deliberately didn't clean it to show you guys the dust build-up, so I did deliberately cut a lot of MDF sheets with this prior to the video that I'm making, just to show you how the dust buildup is. And I did not use a vacuum cleaner or like dust extraction with this saw, just to give you guys an idea of how bad it is, where the dust all will go end up when you do use this without a vacuum cleaner, just to compare it against, you know, if it's of relevance to you. With vacuum cleaner attachment, I tested it on both the top and the bottom. It's actually pretty good for a saw in this price point. There's more expensive ones which make more of a mess. Right, use the big hole of one of the two. These things are not identical. So the one with the biggest hole goes on first, right, which is basically to hold it in place. And then the one with the smaller hole you use to, the other way I guess, to undo it. And then it just comes out. Famous last words. No? Now there's plenty of room here for a normal spanner, so you don't have to use these awkward things that are fucking heck. There we go. Okay. Bloody hell. Whoever tightened that the first time around did a good job of tightening, but yeah, these things are awkward. They're super sharp because they're literally just sheet metal that they press these things out, and they haven't really rounded off the edges, so yeah, you don't want to use them so much. There we go. So this is the included saw blade that comes with the saw. Einhell branded blade. As you can see, I did use it, so the paint that's on there, it does wear off quite quickly. But yeah, what we got here is 30mm round hole, which this washer sort of sits on. So the actual inner ring has got the 30mm aperture there to hold it on, and then this is basically your assembly like so. So we have a 210mm saw blade in diameter, 1.8mm thick, so that's on the tooth, 1.8mm. So it's quite a thin one. So you do, when this thing is spinning, you do get the flex of the blade when you especially feed long pieces of timber in here. You do tend to twist this baby a bit, so keep that in mind. And I don't see the teeth count on here. Oh, 40, sorry, 40 teeth. So there you have it, the included saw blade. To start off with, not a bad choice, but especially if you cut oak or other hardwoods, then you might want to upgrade this. And this actually goes for a lot of these cheaper tools. If you put a proper quality saw blade in them, you can actually get quite a bit done. You don't have to splash out on, I don't know, your Festool or your furniture making style table saws that cost you, well, the price of a house at times. So yeah. So while we're in here, we'll take the riving knife out as well. Then the top is completely flat. We can then flip it on its actual top, so that we can disassemble everything from underneath before we separate the table from the frame. Okay, now for the riving knife, you can use the smallest end of one of these two included wrenches, but they hurt my arms. They hurt my fingers, so let's just use one of these. There we go. This is just clamped in place. The thing I already mentioned in one of the other videos is that this riving knife doesn't come with the option of adjusting the height of it. You can adjust it about this much, depending on, I guess, the saw blade that you're using, but you can't do obscured cuts with this. So this riving knife has got the dimensions of the appropriate saw blades with it. So it gives you the maximum diameter of 210, the maximum width of the teeth 1.8, and then the thickness of the saw blade itself 1.2. So this leading edge is basically designed to deal, or the thickness of this whole thing, sorry, and then there's a chamfered leading edge on it, is made to deal with this sort of saw blade combination. And then the whole point of that riving knife being there is obviously kickback, so that the wood that gets cut, once it's cut, it gets then picked up by the saw blade again and fired at you, because the saw blade turns this way. So it's going in down here and it's coming up, so it's pushing the wood up and goes in your face or your chest and hits you in the heart if you're not careful. So yeah, I recommend don't remove it fully unless you're willing to take that risk. Anyway, let's flip this baby around and then we'll have a look underneath. So you can already see up here that the amount of dust that's present in here without using dust extraction. And the only area that I did clean out in between is the area here, which gives you the angle adjustment of the saw blade. Bloody hell, hold on, oh, there we go. So basically this adjustment, you can feel it a bit now, as you can see the sawdust and things are gathering in this corner here, which stops it from hitting the 45 mark. So you're like, you don't quite get there. So that's a thing to consider, so you have to clean that area out. The other side isn't so bad, but this one, because of the way the dust gets thrown that way, it covers it up in there. You can also see this on the bottom of the cover plate that sits in like so. It's primarily the back of the cover plate that gets covered. This side is perfectly clean, so the dust up here is less than up in there. It's yeah, but we'll flip it around and have a look underneath. Right, so there it is upside down in all its glory. So you can already see the basic construction of the saw. You can see the fastener here and there, and there's two more on the other side which holds the table onto the frame, and then the motor assembly and the adjuster for your slide out mechanism is all held into the bottom of the aluminium die cast table. Just quickly on the topic of sawdust, you can see where the sawdust has escaped the plastic housing. The mechanism here is obviously for your slider arrangement, so that it allows for that tilt to happen. So that hole needs to be there. They could have made it a little bit neater by having some sort of bristles here to cover the gap a little bit better. You can see down here, because of the top here, it escapes, so there's a bit of sawdust there, there's a bit of sawdust on the top of the cover, and then obviously because it's plastic, there's material, air moving around, this stuff gets static, so you do get a build-up on the outside of dust there. And then on this side you can also see where the height adjustment opening is. There's obviously grease, so you expect some dust build up there. Obviously the motor housing is covered in a light dusting, but all in all, looking at the bottom of this saw, so without the use of dust extraction, it's not that bad at all. There's a lot more saws that, with the use of a vacuum cleaner slash professional grade shop vac sort of arrangements, dust extraction, they're a lot worse and a lot messier with repeated cuts of certain materials. I said I did do, I think, about 10 meters of MDF with this stuff, like just cutting small strips, because MDF is probably one of the worst in terms of fine dust. It'll go everywhere. So I just thought, for the purpose of this review, it's part of the teardown. There you have it. So this is obviously the front of the saw, looking at it from the back. This is your brushed motor, the motor housing slash saw blade assembly, which is the whole mechanism that tilts. Yeah. And then over here you can see the two battery terminals with the power supply coming out of the switch, which is right up here on the front of the device. So I think we'll start off by disconnecting the motor power supply from the battery terminal, so that we can detach the frame from the table, which means this will come off together with the frame, and then this will stay with the table, so that we can dissect this machine a little bit easier. So let's go and do that. These are very small Phillip head screws. There'll be 8 of them, 4 per terminal. So this will be the unique part for the Einhell specific cordless model of this saw. The JCB and the Excel will have a corded version, so this arrangement will be different on your saw if you have one of those two. I couldn't quite tell you if the motor is actually different as well, because obviously this is a 36 volt DC unit, whereas on the other ones it'll be a 230 volt unit, unless they use a power converter, which I don't know. I don't know how those saw works, because I haven't quite found a lot of information on the electronic side of those saws. So that could be slightly different on yours. It could well be that it's exactly the same motor and it's just this bit that is different. Obviously, and then the cable that comes with it. Yeah. Okay, so we can't get any more off the back, so let's undo the front of the electronic components. So there's 2 screws here which I believe hold the plastic encasing on, and then there's 4 in these holes that hold the switch on. So let's take them off and let's see where it gets us. Right. So there we go. So simple switch, which is just an on-off switch. Which just allows for a positive and a neutral to be switched. So let's unplug it. A snug one. Whoa! Right, so there you have it. It's a simple switch. Feels nice and sturdy, very stiff. So again, this is made out of ABS. Plastics. I don't know if you can see the markings. There we go. Save a bit of money, eh, in the manufacturing cost of these things. So now we can flip it back around and have a look on the other side. Alright, so now we can remove the electronic compartment, and I'm all excited. I can probably put these battery terminals back on there, but yes. Interestingly, this compartment, the plastic here, which feels very sturdy, very stiff, and is very thick in terms of the wall thickness of the plastic, this is PA6. PA6 with a 30% glass fibre reinforcement, which is odd. The bit that's secluded behind all the metal is the most sturdiest configuration. And then we have the very simple control board with 2 MOSFETs and a bit of a heatsink, and then quite an exuberant, interesting size of heat shrink there, which is just a cable here, which is a non-branded, non-coded piece of cable. So let's remove the table from the frame, then we can have a look at the frame. I'll probably remove just one of the feet just to see what they're made of, but yeah, there's 4 of them and they're all very similar. This one has an extra feature on it which is bolted onto the framing. There we go. So this one has an extra feature on it, which is basically the holster for the slidey mitre gauge arrangement. But yeah, it's basically universal, because you can see the holes on that one there. These things are just made, they're both the same, and I just put this little piece on extra. The same goes for these. They're all identical. So I'll take one apart, but in the interest of time, we know what one looks like, you know what all 4 of them look like. So let's take the frame off the table, and then we'll have a look at the rest, because then it's a little bit easier access. The only thing I just realized is I have to take the wheel off it. So I just flipped it around to pop the cover off to get the wheel off the little metal shaft. There's a few clips on the back which with your fingers you can just about unclip them, so that's basically all that's to it there. A bit dusty, and again we're working with ABS plastics, so there you have it. So again, simple cover, plus and minus as in up and down, and then what it reveals is a nice simple wheel. I actually quite like it without the cover on it, which looks quite neat. But yeah, anyway, and then you just unscrew the screw here. Oh, this is quite loose. Oh dear. Loctite on there, but it wasn't really tightened. And then we just pop this off. Famous last words. You can see by just wiggling it how much play there is in the shaft and the bearings that basically hold it into the, well, the absence of bearings in the casting. There we go. So that's just a simple wheel. Let's see if we can find some. And then here we have the proper tool grade plastic PA6 with a 30% glass fiber reinforcement. I don't know if you can see it, but okay, so now we got the handle off. Let's take the locking mechanism off. So basically all this does is a tension screw, so you basically just tighten it and it clamps on this flange on both sides with two washers, which I'll show you in a minute. But yeah, just to get it off, it's held in with a little Phillips screw, so we'll just undo this, and again this isn't very tight, so these fasteners are on there very loosely. Yeah, or you can so this is what the plastic handle feels like, very sturdy design. Let's see if we can find any markings on here. PA6 with a 30% glass fiber reinforcement. So again, this handle is of the proper tool grade material. So glass fiber reinforcement, 30% in there, and yeah, nice and stiff. I don't know why they didn't make the cover for the saw blade thing at the top out of that material. It just makes all the difference having the proper stuff. Anyway, there might be an improvement point there, I know, for your saw. Right, and then the only other thing that we have to take off is the indicator gauge here, which this frame gives you a good indication of how you can adjust it. So there's a little screw here that you can undo. There we go. And then you got the opportunity to move it around if your sticker indication guide here isn't quite within reach, so you can fine tune it there. Obviously measure as we've shown in part 2. Whoops. So a bit of Loctite on there again, same as with the screw for this one. And it's got a little spring washer and a little washer on there, and then this is just a painted piece of metal, which is basically what your pointer is for your angle indication there. So we'll put that to one side. Right. Now the only other thing that stops us from taking the whole frame off, if you like, is we have to undo these two clamp screws. So as I've already shown, you can just undo it like this, and then you have this movement of motion. So that's all that is basically a nut with a bolt end on it, and then on the end there is just a hole with a threaded inner piece, which the screw goes in for basically securing the handle so the handle doesn't come off. But yeah, this is just a flat washer, which because of the already constant use, you can see it's warped nicely. So this basically is what clamps the two pieces together, and stops it from moving. Very simple, very basic design, but it works, so yeah. Anyhow, let's take this washer out here, which this is basically the washer that holds the other end together. So yeah, it's just it presses together on this flange, which holds it in place, stops it from sliding, and by undoing the handle you basically slacken off these two shims, which allows you for this to be moving freely. Rightio. So now nothing should stop us from taking the frame off, so let's start by doing that. So there we go. Fairly straightforward, this saw, not too complex. It's all just basic mechanics. So there we have it. So this is just a round shaped washer, which the nut goes on, and you can see the two contact points, the very little contact points, which clamp around the tubing over here. And then over here it's just a flat washer. Which the bolt on the other end is now turning and twisting. Oh, it's actually, yeah, it's quite thick, but it's just a flat washer, which has actually got a tapered in edge in it to allow for the bolt to slightly weeble wobble around, so that in case you aren't quite central, you know, you have this little bit of wiggle room to still get it tight. So it's allowed for some tolerances there. Right, I'll get the other two off and then we'll continue. On this side, where the nut and bolt hold on to frame onto the table, basically, there's a rubber bushing here, as well as on the other side of the leg up here, which is the park position. So if you store it away, you're not using the saw to take up less space, you can put it on its side. To undo the rubber buffer or bumper or whatever you want to call it. It's a little H4 or hex 4 Allen key number 4 bolt that you undo, and then the whole assembly comes out. You have to remove these two fully before you can lift the frame off, because it goes into the side, so it goes all the way through the tube, so you can't just lift it up. So let's just take these out and do the other one quickly, and then we can continue. In case you're wondering why you have to turn these out, the aluminium table is actually threaded, so the bolt is screwed into the aluminium table, and then it's secured on the other side with the old washer and the nut. There we go. You can just hear the table drop slightly, and then this is just a hex 4 Allen key 4, quite long, and then the rubber bushing. It's got a double stack of washers in there. There's 2 washers. There we go, and then it's just a normal rubber bushing with no markings on it. So that's basically all that. We should be able to just lift the whole frame off. So let's try give that a go, shall we? Handle there is in the way. There we go. Okay, so there we have it. That's the frame. Just a simple metal frame. Feels nice and sturdy. So yeah, nothing wrong with that as such. So let's put that on the side for now. We'll have a look at that a little bit later. And then this is what you're left with. Right, so what are we looking at? A cast aluminium table, the locking mechanism for your slider table extension, and the electronic box is obviously fitted to the frame which holds your battery terminals, which we'll have a closer look at in a minute, so we'll put that on the side. Then this is obviously your main assembly with the saw blade in it, which is the bit that you basically turn, tilt is probably a better word for it, to allow for your angle to cut at. And then obviously, if if we put the wheel back on it, your height adjustment for the saw blade. So that's basically that. And as I already mentioned in I think part number 1, is that this only has one spindle on this side with a guide pin at the bottom there, nicely greased up, lots of grease on it, which is nice. And on the other side it's just held into a guide which gives you a slight bit of movement. As you can see, the whole mechanism does tilt a little bit, so that's to keep in mind obviously when you want to buy this saw and do accurate furniture making type of projects. Then yeah, be very gentle with feeding in the wood, because you could just twist the whole assembly slightly and don't get the exact measurements that you are after. The good thing is that this obviously is at the front, so where you feed the wood in, it supports it the most, which is the important part. So let's take the motor assembly off, and then we'll have a look at the mechanics, and then we'll have a look at the electronics. Right, so the motor is held in with these 4 Phillip heads. I think Phillip heads is the sort of theme of the show today. So we'll just undo these. These are actually torqued up quite nicely. Stop the motor from flying at you, when you're cutting away. Okay. Right, there we have it. A brushed 36 volt direct current DC motor. So we'll put this to the side for now, and then we'll have a look at this thing a little bit later. And then I think we can turn it around and undo the 4 screws that hold this saw blade housing / height assembly on, and then we're left with the table and the extension. It might be best if you undo these bolts before you flip it around, so that at least you can leave it upside down to take the rest of the assembly apart if you do this yourself at home. It's the first time I'm taking this apart, so I'm sort of figuring it out as we go along. Righto. Nope. This side has nuts on it on the other side, so keep that in mind. The front is bolted straight into the aluminium casting of the inner assembly here. Now I do normally use power tools when I take these things apart, but because my newborn 2-month-old is asleep right above us in the bedroom, I don't want to make too much noise and having to deal with a crying baby all evening, so apologies for the hand toolness of the experience, but I think we got it. Oh dear. Yeah, I think we got it. That just woke him up. Yeah. Just taking the nozzle off here so I can get rid of all the sawdust. I'm going to put it back together. At least it's clean. Right, there we go. So, interesting about this, can I put it down like this? Yes, sort of. So the sliding mechanisms on both sides, which run onto these pieces, a liberal amount of grease, although this is lined with a plastic liner for extra sliding performance, as in you can see it there. I'll have a look to see if I can find what sort of plastic it is. Yeah, it just slides on these aluminium half moon shaped guides there to allow for this 45 degree angle to be reached. So yeah, that's basically all that is. Alright, this feels like a more familiar position for me with the tool teardowns that I've been doing so far on the channel. With obviously the camera being here, which when I do take bits apart normally, yeah, I don't need to have to stand back about a meter from the workbench to get things shown to you. just wiping the dust off it. But yeah, this is the cover shield that sits in here, that slides basically when the mechanism slides to its 45-degree angle, held in with a little washer and a simple little Phillips head screw into the plastic there. Now this is, which way round do we do it? Polycarbonate. So this is a very hard plastic, which you can see there. So it's nice and simple design, I guess. It's just a cover for the dust, so it really hasn't got any other feature than a dust cover. Right, so let's remove the plastic cover. I'll just as you can see here as well, this is also a polycarbonate cover. Happening to this, but if you're cutting small strips of wood and they do get fired into the housing, because the cover plate is at anything and everything but zero clearance, so as you can see already there's a bit chipped out here when I was cutting because a piece of timber went in it. It does smash up the inside of this, so this can crack over time, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, there we have it, a simple cover plate. Let me just clean this up, and we're back. Right, and then the so that's just a threaded piece of metal that's sort of held in with a little spring clamp clip arrangement there. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's interesting to say the least. Bit that holds the spanners that live in this opening here with the wing nut on it. But yeah, it's a bit flimsy to say the least, but yeah. Right, so this is the inner bit, so the saw blade goes onto this shaft here, and then this is the slider bit basically attached to where the motor assembly is attached to, and then this is where the riving knife lives. I'll clean this up a bit and then we'll have a closer look at it. The bit I forgot to mention is there's no rubber gasket or anything around it. There's just this this piece of plastic here and this groove here, which basically covers up around the perimeter of it to keep any dust inside. So yeah, it's not sealed as such with a gasket or anything, so over time there might be a little bit of dust leakage, but with a vacuum cleaner or a shop vac dust extraction attached to this saw, I don't think you'll have an awful lot of debris around it. And then this piece slides off, so this is where your dust extraction is hooked onto, and then you have the optional reducer here that you can screw in place and fit it on there with the screw that comes with it, a big one there. So this fits on a normal vacuum cleaner, in case you haven't got a shop vac arrangement in the house. Now these two bits, just clean them up a bit. These bits are also made out of, where are we? This one is ABS, so that's okay, I guess. And then this one is also ABS, so a mixture of plastics on this saw. Only one of which a proper tool grade plastic, so again, this is where the budget offering comes to play. Let's flip it around. So this is a nice cast aluminium. You can see some either machine marks, or this is where the saw blade might have yeah, this is where the saw blades already start to make its mark into the aluminium, because the saw blade is a little bit flex. I did abuse it a little bit to see what it would do. It didn't stall, but yeah, the saw blade, you do see it flexing quite a bit if you feed in the wood deliberately at an angle and then trying to push over a bit. So keep that in mind when you're using it with the original blade, that is. Yeah, on this side, obviously this is your height adjuster. This is where the wheel sits on. This way, there we go. And then the gearing, which is plastic gearing, held in with a screw onto the shaft, and the same goes for this one there. And as I already mentioned in I think the first video, there is no bearings as such in this shaft. So it's a bit rattly, it's got a bit of play on it, so especially with the wheel on it, which this is also, you know, has a bit of play in it because of the way it's like not fully secured. So I could open it up, tighten it a little bit just to give it that little bit more of a snug feel. But yeah, you will always have that little bit of a flimsy feel to it because of the way this is not put into some small little bearings. So that's that bit for you. Right, so let's open up these two, and then we can take the sliding mechanism apart. Now everything on this saw so far is either 10mm hex bolts, nuts, or Phillips heads. So, oh, and we got a number 4 Allen key. So nice little die cast aluminium piece. So this is where the riving knife bolts onto. So the riving knife sits in here. So yeah, just cleaned up a bit. Die cast aluminium with no markings on this whatsoever. So we don't know how much aluminium and other ingredients are used in the making of this piece. Right. Great tip if you're using a little paintbrush. It's great for cleaning up soft bristles so you don't scratch plastics and stuff with it. It's great for cleaning out sawdust and other pieces of grime. Right. So then we should be able to not twist this. So you can already see by just having it on the table here, if you look at this shaft, if I just twist this a little bit, you can see that this is bending. Right there. So the bearing in there has a bit of play in it as well, so not the most sexiest of solutions, if I may say so. So let's undo these two, and these again are very loose. They're not really torqued at all, so that's a little worrying that I know on the torquing department. In the automotive industry, everything is computer controlled. You can't pass the car to the next station of assembly on the line until the computer says you torqued it all up properly, with the electronic torque guns that they use on the lines over there. Right. So and then we have the support bar that basically acts as an extra support so that the whole mechanism isn't solely relying on the spindle, which you can see is at the top here has got a little bit of play in already. So it uses this bar that's just behind it. So I just put the wheel on there to hold this shaft to basically stop this thing from keeping spinning so that we can undo it. And again, it's not very tight. It's a locking 13mm nut, which again isn't very tight, and then they used a selection of washers on this particular occasion. So they got a rubber washer to pre-tension the lot, and then 2 metal washers to basically act as a little expansion area for this little rubber washer there. So that lives just in between these two washers, and a little nylock nut which hasn't even engaged into the actual nylock by the looks of things. So this thread is not long enough. So this nylock nut normally should have at least 3 threads, I believe, poking through this other end to make sure that it's fully secured into the nylock. So the nylock feature of that nut is not of added value in this particular application. Whoops, it's not fit that. Anyway, so now we should be able to lift this up, and again I'm surprised, and that's why it's so wobbly. There is no bearing in here, so this shaft just runs into this aluminium housing with no bearing, which is why the whole thing feels a little weeble wobbly. So that's an improvement point there. Right, let's take this one off so I can take the shaft out of the way. Alright. Okay. Just use the hammer and a small screwdriver to basically tap the gearing off the shaft. But yeah, as you can already see, it's wearing into the aluminium, or the aluminium is wearing out because of the shaft, because you can see the rub mark in the galvanized metal here. But it's just a little metal shaft machined with some threaded ends on it. You can see this is where the other excuse me, the other aluminium support is. So, and then this is the gearing. The gearing as such is quite interesting, quite funny, is that the marking is a mirror image, so they put it the wrong way around in the mold of this gearing. So it's backwards in mirror image. So it's 30% glass fiber reinforced PA6. So it's tool grade gearing, but yeah, they are plastic. It's only height adjustments. The good thing about this saw is that the height adjustment is pretty quick, as you can see. It doesn't require a lot of turns to go from top to bottom. And, there we go. A bit of oil on this one. There we are. And that's the other one again, PA6, 30% glass fiber reinforced. These things are identical. Right, and then we can remove the height adjuster shaft from its arrangement. Nice bit of grease on here, which over time gets covered because sawdust gets in everywhere. And this is a metal shaft, threaded, and the end is thinned down with a smaller piece on there, which is basically what this bearing and the screw at the end there is for, to hold it in place. Almost tight with the lock teeth on it. Right, and then ta-da! So yeah, this is just the extra support metal bar held in place with 2 screws either end to basically stop the whole thing from twisty turning. And then a plastic cover plate to protect the opening from sawdust getting out when the saw is in its highest position. So that's all this plate is for. Held in with 2 little screws. And then the plate is just a bit of ABS plastic, nice and cheap, nothing spectacular there, but it's hidden on the inside, so does it really need to be anything else? We'll have a look at the bearing in a second. And then we have this arrangement to cover for sawdust when the saw is in its lowest position, so it doesn't blow out the hole there. A slider mechanism. When you slide it down, it slides out of the way, and then when you slide it the other way it slides back, so it basically acts as this sort of, I'm going way too far with it, but yeah, basically it's a bit stiff, but when you have the arm on it, the gearing, it'll make it easier. But yeah, that's basically just a little mechanism for dust cover. Apart from the markings on here, which shows that it was made in 2020, nothing else. The plastic is again ABS, so that's marked up, but the casting here has no markings on it whatsoever, so I couldn't tell you what the ingredients of this are. It has some aluminium in it, but normally they add some zincs and all sorts of other materials to give it its special properties. So yeah, let's put that out of the way. Let's have a look at the gear reduction. And by doing that, we have to open up these two screws. And up. And this one. There we are. And then we lift this out. There we go. So this is the gear reduction, single gear reduction. So this is the tooth which the motor drives instantly. So it goes from the motor, which does an RPM of probably something around 30,000 RPM, and then this gets it down to about 3,800, I believe, at the top of my head from the specification sheet. But if I got it wrong, I'll put it down there. Yeah, hardened steel gearing. You can see it's only surface treated because you can see the discoloration there through the grease. It's got a nice bearing. As you can hear, I hope the microphone picks up on it. Not a lot of play in it, so that's all good. So yeah, just a fully sealed bell bearing there. I don't really want to press it out the housing because I'm afraid I'm going to bend the aluminium doing so. So I'm just going to leave that there, but nothing too concerning there. That's actually a pretty neat little assembly, and also on this interesting casted piece of aluminium, I can't see any markings as such other than, oh wait, we've got some in there. What's it say? I don't know if that's the material specification or just a production number, AD012. So that's that bit. Let's have a look at the motor. So as we already briefly touched upon, the electronics of this saw are very simple. So they put this big bulky box on the back of it to make it look like it's something big and special, but yeah, that's it. Two MOSFETs. So they're both the same. So in case anybody wants to know, there you have it. The details are in the screen. A little capacitor on there. Very simple board, nothing special. And as you can see, the battery terminal here, the red cable goes, oh, let's zoom out a little bit, that's a bit crazy. So the battery terminal here, red cable goes to this one, so that basically puts them in series, so that turns the 18 volt of the Experience into 36 volts. So if you only fit one of them, won't work. It needs all two of them, because the minus goes to the board there, as in the B minus. Yeah, and then we got the P minus, which comes from the motor, which is the return from the motor. So that's stepped down from this here to a little cable there. There's a little spade connector just like this, just slightly smaller, under the heat shrink there. And then we've got a K, which helps with turning the machine off when things get a bit too toasty. And that's it. There's nothing more to it really, so that's all there is. So yeah, and the plastic housing, it's just got a cover on the back here to basically cover up the gap, because these battery terminals are so bulky, because they need to be, because of the batteries being so big. But yeah, very simple plus and minus terminal, as we've seen them from Einhell on many of the other tools. So this is just an off-the-shelf part, standard for all the applications, and then a little plastic. Let's see if we can find some markings on there. There we have it. A little bit of ABS molding, which basically acts as the battery holder. So the battery clips in here, slides in there, easy peasy. Nothing special there. A massive bit of heat shrunk that basically comes from the cable and provides the two wires that come out of here, the white one and the black one. And then the white one is the one controlled by the switch, so basically you interrupt the power feed to the motor by turning the switch on or off. So all the current that goes through the motor runs through this switch. So right, let's take this one off. Let's turn that one off, save some batteries. Rightio. Right. A simple cover, PA6 with 30% glass fibre reinforcement, as it says in there. Now the cool thing is with this cover is actually it's molded so that you have easy access to the brushes, which you can see here and here, which is quite nice. Quite beefy brush holders, nothing wrong there. As it's first time I'm looking into one of these, so I haven't got a clue how it's put together, but we're learning together here, which might make for some interesting video, huh? Right, let's see. Yeah, so the front of the motor is supported by the bearing there, so the whole thing is now loose. It's just a matter of how do I get the cover off. There we go. Slowly but steadily. So I believe this is a... No, it's not. It's fighting against the permanent magnets. There we go. There we have it. The electric motor. Let's take this off. There we go. A little plastic cover plate made out of PA6 with 30% glass fibre reinforced. So they use all the good bits in here. And then PA6 on the cooling fan as well. As I said, it's a multi-purpose motor because it's got a two-directional cooling fan. Now this being a saw application, a stationary saw, table saw, they only ever turn one way. There is no forwards and backwards, so hence the no need for two-directional. For better cooling, they could have put a one-directional fan on here, which then would also help with getting the sawdust out of the saw, because it could do that at the same time, generating airflow into that area. That. And then a little bushing on the bearing at the back. Nicely encaged bearing, which, how can I say what they are? Let's have a look. 67 RS, oh sorry, 605 7 RS, so it's just standard ball bearing, deep groove, encaged with, sealed, sorry, with the seal on both sides so that the garbage that you're cutting doesn't get inside, and then on the inside of the motor. But yeah, you can also see the balancing marks of the machining marks where they balance the motor out so it doesn't weeble wobble on you when it spins at full speeds. And then over here the permanent magnets. You can see the cable that goes down the housing, comes out the back to the brushes. So that's all pretty straightforward stuff there. Held in with some simple fasteners there, so that's interesting to say the least. The only thing I did wrong there is I should have pulled the brushes back before I pulled the rotor out, so we'll have to keep that in mind when we put the motor assembly back in there. But yeah, that's it basically. So from a serviceability point of view, it's not bad actually. You just pop the end off and you can swap out your brushes and you can keep using it. Right, having a look at the frame, all metal. So the frame is, these are one pieces, bent. I'll take one of these covers off for you now. And then on the back of it, if we flip it around, whoop, there you go, you can see these are the brackets for the end stops, which is held in with 10mm screws. And then this is your holster for the push stick, which has a little retain clip there, held in with 2 nuts and bolts there, tiny little M8s, I guess. So yeah, nothing spectacular there. Feels as if it's no markings on it, but it feels like it's ABS plastic, so nothing spectacular there. So let's take one of the rubber foot off and have a look what's inside them, and then whoop, let's get a bit closer here. The front cover plate is just held in with these 2 screws. It's just a pressed metal sheet which is then painted and the stickers put on the front. Nothing spectacular, fairly straightforward design. So yeah, screws there, screw there, screw there, held in place like that, easy peasy. So yeah, nothing spectacular there. So I guess the frame as such is pretty straightforward. And the cross members, this one is held in with the screw on this side and over there, and then the top one over there and over there. My camera just died, as in the battery ran out, so I had to quickly recharge it, and while I was waiting for that to happen, I decided to take off camera the foot off the frame, as you can see here. So the frame is just a bent tube frame where this foot then sort of sits onto. The foot itself, whoops, let's put this back down. Obviously the frame is now wobbly because there's a foot missing, but yeah, the foot is made out of 2 identical pieces, mirror image, that sort of slot together like so. So mirror image. These are made out of PA6 with a 30% glass fibre reinforcement in it, so these are nice and stiff and strong, tool grade plastic. And then the rubber insert, which sits inside it, is made out of a TP. So this is a fully TP made piece of plastic, as you put it bluntly. Right, and then this sits in here like so. It's a little snug, there we go, and then they fit together nicely like so. And then the cover is held together with a few screws, and then obviously the bolts that go through the holes, nuts and bolts to hold it in place, and then the aperture that's held onto one side of these that holds in this accessory stuff is just a simple piece of plastic with no further markings on it as far as I can see. So that's that. And then the only other thing I forgot to mention earlier is obviously these sliders that sit on the bottom of the table like so, in which the saw mechanism slides from 0 to 45 degrees. I did clean it up a little bit and popped the little piece of plastic out. So this is just a guide to help slide it a little bit easier. This is made out of a POM material, a POM. Now the table, as you can see it here, upside down, as in this is the bottom. So this is the aluminium structure of the table, so it's a fairly rigid structure. The thickness of the table itself we can measure in this area here. So what are we working with here in terms of thickness? Let's get a light on there. It's a bit difficult to read upside down, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. So that's a 2.5mm thick aluminium table there for you, which is fairly heavy. It feels very sturdy. It looks like it's bent a little bit, so it's not 100% flat. I think it warped slightly as it cooled down, because again this is a one-piece cast which isn't machined all that much after. Even the top doesn't look machined, it's just painted in a silver color paint. There's again no markings on it other than some date stamps, so this saw is, or the pieces are made over the course of 2020. The saw itself has a marking on it for December 2020, so it's a late 2020 model. So that's basically the underside of it. We'll flip it round in a bit and have a look at how straight the actual table is, as in the flatness of it, which obviously helps you create high quality workpieces at the end of the day. So let's do that in a second. Before we flip it around, let's have a look at the slider rail fixing mechanism. So the extension or table slide piece that basically slides in and out and then locks is a locking mechanism, which is basically a metal rod that's get pushed outwards in both directions, and it's spring loaded, so when it is undone by this handle, it's basically these springs are under tension, and then when you release the handle, sorry, reduce, silly word, it's basically just a little triangular hinge here. These springs push it open so that you can have this sliding motion, and then underneath here, we'll take the rails off in a second, it just pushes against the aluminium basically to stop it from sliding, as in a friction stop, if you like. It's a very simple but effective solution. So the handle is held in place with 2 bolts. The handle itself is very similar to the one that's on the saw, apart from the bit here, which is for the saw angler adjustment, the bit that goes there. So same material, PA6, so that's good. No wrong there. 10mm fastener, sorry. Then we have a metal rod that goes to this side with a little adjustment opportunity here between the plastic piece and the metal rod. A little bracket here to hold it onto the table when it's in the released position, so it doesn't start dangling around. And then a little piece on here which is held in to the table with a little bracket there to stop it from flying out, because obviously when you tension it, this thing wants to pop out, so that's basically there to stop that from happening. Right, let's flip it around, have a look at the squareness of the table, and then we take the extension apart, and that'll pretty much conclude the disassembly of the saw. Now what I've done is, this is the front of the table, that's the back, because the handle is still attached down here, so I can't put it flat on the table in the other direction. But we'll have a look in this direction first, and then we'll flip it 90 degrees and have a look at the other direction. The thing I already noticed when pressing on the level here is that on the far end of the table there's a bit of a dip, which is also present on this end. So the middle bit, as in where the saw is actually pretty flat in this direction, but on this end and on the far end it's slightly proud in the middle, and I'll show you that with a bit of light behind the ruler. So as you can see, there's a bit of light coming through there, and then if we move it over here, you can also see there's some light there, so there's a slight dip there. And as well there, so that's where the table is slightly off. Oh dear, that's straight into the camera lens. Wait a minute, let's do it like this. There we go. Then close to the saw blade you can see a little dip in the casting here. If I move it along, you You can also see one here, which is with the thin pieces because where the cutout is. So this is where the material cooled down and in the process sagged a little bit, which is why that dip is there. For the rest, it's pretty flat. So if we move it forward, you can see also here there's a small dip, and over there they'll be the same there, which is where the middle of the saw goes, which is about there. So there's a gap there as well. So all in all, and then having a look at the end here, you can see there's a little gap in the middle here, which is now where the, you can see also there's quite a lot of light down there. So that's where the table has some dimples, shall we call them. Right, let's move it 90 degrees. Pretty okay. Obviously the light will go through here because those are the T-tracks for your parallel slidey guide, miter gauge, whatever it is. But you can see here that the edge of the casting is dipping into this T-track, and the same if I move it over there. Let's see, there we go. You can see the same there where it's dipping in slightly. If I block the light a little bit, and then if I move it closer, it's a slight bit of play there, but all in all, not bad. And you can see here down the middle, whoa, I have to hold it with my hand there, but down the middle here you can see there's also a little bit of light going through. So that's where there's a little dip right in front of the saw, the cutout where the saw goes. If you look at some offerings from brands like Ryobi or Black & Decker and the cheapo versions of Metabo and things, they are using a stamped metal tabletop, which first of all it feels a bit flimsy, it looks a bit flimsy. The T-tracks are very poorly designed on those, so I think considering all that, so let's remove the slides on both sides. So the rail for the slider table extension is held in with 4 fasteners, screw directly into the aluminium table. So Phillips heads, which are sort of the theme of today's video. And then we remove the black metal piece, and then we can undo the slider mechanism. Thing is, you don't have to fully remove them. They are held in place with oh, hold on, I'm not in the frame, so the plastic end cap that sits here, you'll have to sort of pull that out in a minute, and then we can just slide the rail the other way, and you can see how it's just clamped in place inside the aluminium track there, aluminium extrusion profile. Slide it out the other way, and you will find no bearings whatsoever. It's just an aluminium extrusion that slides into the other rail, which is why from a certain distance you do get the little weeble wobble, because there has to be obviously a few tenths of a gap in between. But yeah, no bearings or sliders, guides. It's a very simple design. Right. So what you can also see here is the metal pin that's basically the slide stop. So that metal pin pushes on the inside of this rail. You can just see the indentation there of one of the frequently used positions. So by applying the lever, you can see it's pushing the pin out slightly, and it does it on both sides at the same time. So it's basically forcing these two panels to be pushed out and clamping down, so it's like a friction stop. Now this screw here is an end stop to basically have the rail reach its furthest position without going all the way out. Okay, accessories. So the push stick is just a simple piece of plastic, nothing spectacular. Simple mold. It's made out of ABS plastic. Again, so there's four types of plastic that we came across in this tool so far. So again, this is polycarbonate PC. This is transparent polycarbonate versus the black one that we saw earlier. So this is a very hard plastic material, but this is just a two-piece cover held in with a bunch of screws. So I'm just going to quickly undo them for you. It does feel quite sturdy compared to some of the other offerings out there, especially in the budget segment of the market. It is a pretty decent and quite large cover. Protector guard, whatever you want to call it, but this is the exact same model that they use on many of the other slightly bigger stationary table saws, which might mean it feels that it's slightly out of place in this application. One more screw to go. And for those of you who missed video number 2, and I forgot to mention this in the features overview in video 1 of this little mini series, but if you undo this black cap here with the one screw, you'll find, there you go, ta-da, another dust extraction point which you can hook up a hose. I believe Einhell sell a separate table saw hose kit with a Y piece that you can put on the back of the dust extraction point, and then a hose on here, and then you can use one vacuum cleaner for both the sorry, there's another fastener hidden under there. Right, let's take that one out. Right, there we have it. Two pieces of the the missing one that was a bit stubborn. Yeah, very hard, very firm cover, as you can see. Very identical, both PC polycarbonate. The only difference to both sides is that this has a slightly longer piece down the bottom here, which basically acts as a guard for when the saw is tilted at a 45-degree angle, just to cover a little bit more of the saw blade up when you have it tilted at the 45-degree angle. And obviously, because it only tilts one way, you don't necessarily need it on this side. Right, so that's that one. Mitre gauge slider arrangement, very simple, extruded aluminium piece here, and this piece with some plastic inserts on both sides to give you that little extension to work with thinner pieces. Yeah, I can't find any markings on here, but it feels very soft, so it's probably another ABS plastic of choices. And then a very simple plasticky mitre gauge, which these screws, that's all a bit too close and too bulky for these small applications, so it does feel a bit crowded here to having to deal with all these. And then this just slides out like so. And then you have the two screws. This comes up all the way. Whoa! And this is the exact same handle that's on the front of the saw, as in the height adjuster wheel, like so. So that's what the inside of that wheel looks like, in case you were wondering. The exact same like that. And then this is just held in with a little screw at the bottom there. I think you get the idea by now. Again, ABS plastic on this one there. It says it right there. I don't know if you pick up on it in the camera, but the lighting here is a bit rubbish. ABS plastics, and that's it. So that's basically what your mitre gauge angle divider thingy is all about there. So let's bonjour that off to one side. Au revoir. And then the last bit, but not the least, is actually quite a nice sturdy fence with the fence extender fitted, so this has got the two. I don't really use this bit a lot because the fence in all its glory is only 50mm 5 centimeters high, so it's not that high to begin with. So only if you're doing very thin sort of fine carpentry jobs. I don't really use this bit, it's more in the way than anything else, so I have it off most than anything else. So by removing these screws, you end up with a nice smooth fence arrangement. They did countersunk these holes nicely so they're not in the way, and then you end up with a nice sturdy fence. So let me just put this out of the way for now. Now the good thing is, too much stuff. This thing is quite I mean, you should see the exploded view drawing that Einhell put on their website in the service department for this thing. It's quite hilarious. For a bit of a laugh, I'll put it here. Try and make sense of it. So anyway, the fence. So the fence mechanism. I did tighten them up quite nicely because I didn't want them to go crooked, but yeah, there we go. I'll have to watch back my number 2 video now as to how to set it up properly again, hey? Because I took it all apart. Right, there you have it. So there you can see also the adjustment of the saw, and there's a strong spring in here, but you can basically see this hole is a round hole, that's a given. This one is a slotted over hole, which gives you the opportunity to adjust the fence slightly to have it perfectly parallel to your saw blade if you wanted that. And then the way we can, you can already see by pulling on this, so basically this lever is pulling the spring, and then by pulling the spring you can see that this bracket is pushed inwards, which is just hinged at the top there. Very simple but effective design. Little plastic end stop at the bottom here, and a little plastic cover on the edge here to help it slide over the edge of the table so it's not sort of binding into the table. So that's the spring. So it's basically a metal rod connected to this hinge. Oh, there we go. That's going to be a bastard to put back together. But yeah, that's basically the metal rod at the end, which you pull on to tighten it back. Oh. So that's basically that bit. So that's a very simple design, a metal rod with a little spring at the end there. And then there's a little insert there against the spring, so that plastic piece is basically the little end stop for the spring to sit into. Very simple design. And then this is just a little tensioner. And then on the front here, whilst you're pulling the spring, by pushing it in, you can see here this piece is all attached, which clamps it on the front onto the aluminium extrusion there. Now this black piece is also a nice die-casted aluminium piece with plenty of opportunity for adjustment. So you got the screw here, which gives you the fine adjustment of this little lens, so you can get your millimeters quite accurately after you've done the rough setup. Check out part video number 2 of this mini series. And then you got these 2 blocks here, which held in with these 2 screws, which are basically just plastic slider guides as well. So I can just undo one for you here. Nothing spectacular. There's no markings on this piece because it's so small. I guess they ran out. Oh, there is. I'm lying. They're very tiny. So PA6. So this is again tool grade plastic without the glass fiber reinforcement this time, but then again, do you really need it? This is just a plastic piece that acts as a slider to make it slide into the aluminium extrusion when you're using the fence. So that's basically that bit. Yeah, so this is just a pressed in hinge which pushes down on a spring. So that's not very spectacular in other regards. And then this plastic handle is held into that with the two screws there, so I guess you'll get the gist of that bit. But yeah, nicely aluminium extrusion. The paint finish on it though is not great because there's already some blisters and the paint's sort of already starting to come off, so expect this, which is aluminium colour underneath, the blackness to go off it. Right. Okay, to summarise, so we've taken everything apart, including all the accessories that come with the saw. As you can see, there's quite a lot of bits. It's so much bits that I can't actually fit them all on the table without making it just a pile of, making the pile this high. Starting with the electronics, I guess, as they're in the front. So a brushed motor, which there's nothing wrong with it. There's no brand name or anything on it, so it's an unbranded motor as far as I can see. The electronics that we looked at, a very simple board, nothing spectacular there. Pretty straightforward. On the good side, on the plus side there, as well is that the I don't want to drop that. The brushes are easy accessible because of the cover that sort of comes off, so that's a service plus, I think, in my book. So that's good. Then we had a look at the frame and everything. So the bits that you touch, the handles, they're all tool grade plastics, so that's good, PA6. Then a lot of die-cast aluminium pieces that we had a look at, which are good. The slider mechanism that runs in the saw blade housing is only supported on one side. It runs in the slider on the other side, so that gives you a little bit of play. The die-cast aluminium pieces haven't got any markings on them, so I can't tell you what exactly they're made of. But other than that, they look very sturdy, they feel very sturdy. The bearing as well, the gearing, hardened steel gearing on there, nice beefy bearing in it, encased in a nice aluminium housing, so that's all good, especially in this price point. The downside, I think, on the housing is the use of plastic, so this is all polycarbonate, the same material in a different color than used on the cover of the saw. So the same material is a different color. The table itself is a nice cast aluminium table, 2.5mm thick. We looked at some warpness issues, flatness issues. There is some issues, but they are very minor, a few tenths at most. So I think for the DIY purpose, which this saw sort of caters for, acceptable. We had a look at the slider mechanism. So the slider rail, where is it? So much stuff, it's unreal. The slider rail, it just slides into the other piece, the counter piece that's fitted to the table on both sides, at the top and the bottom. There's no further bearings or guides in here. On the furthest extension, expect some play. I think I measured it in my first video, but correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, this does obviously over time does get a little bit wibbly wobbly, so keep that in mind. The foot on the frame of the saw, which is the red bit over there, yeah, sturdy PA6 with a glass fiber reinforcement and a TPE rubberized foot, so that's all nice and solid, nothing to complain on that. The fence mechanism is all nice aluminium die cast as well, which is painted in black with some nice sliders in plastic, so this is actually a pretty well thought out little piece of kit. For this price point, definitely acceptable. The accessories, apart from the mitre gauge thing, which this thing, yeah, I think this is just something that you can hang on the wall and look at, make it, you know, a piece of decoration in your house or something, because actually usability of this thing, it weeble wobbles in the tracks as we saw in the first video. The fasteners in this area here and here, whoa, are a little bit on the bulky side, so this makes using these things quite awkward, so I wouldn't bother with this and upgrade to something more proper for about 50 quid on Amazons or internets, wherever you buy your stuff from. Having said that, even on the more premium offerings from DeWalt and Metabo, well actually Metabo does a halfway decent one actually, but Bosch, Makita, they're all very flimsy and not so great. The only other thing I did want to quickly touch back upon is the riving knife. So the riving knife is one position and one position only. So with this saw you can't really do obscured cuts without cutting without this, which is not recommended. So my tip would be buy a second one of these, cut it so that you have one that is tall enough so you can use it with the dust extraction if you work inside a workshop, and then have the second one that you can use obviously without the dust extraction, but then do your covered cuts with them. I'm just looking around to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Yeah, a lot of bits obviously that are laying around the workshop at the minute. A lot of it is ABS, polycarbonate. I think I would like to see a little bit more of the PA6 plastics. They're a little bit more sturdy, a bit more durable. But all in all, I think for a saw that, like I said before, on a Black Friday offering, you can pick up for as cheap as 160 euros sometimes. It's an absolute steal. 36 volt cordless, so it brings that extra practicality. If you're already part of the Einhell battery platform, then it's pretty much a no-brainer if you already have some batteries at home. If you're not yet part of that family and you want to be joining because of this saw, the batteries compared to others are a little bit on the pricey side. With a newborn baby in the house, so apologies if my video uploads this year have been a bit hit and miss. They haven't been as frequent as they used to be previously. I'm trying to get better at it, but yeah, for the time being, I'm doing my best with everything going on. Thanks very much for watching. If you have any suggestions for other products, I get a lot of requests for Einhell specific things. I think the chainsaw, the 36 volt chainsaw was already on the list, so I got my hands on one of those, so we'll put that on. But I don't want to just do a sea of Einhell and nothing else, so I'm trying to mix it up a little bit. Right, this video is already way too long, but it's a big saw, so it took me way too much time to take it all apart. Thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you like the video. The playlist for this saw 3-part video series, go and check out the other 2 videos if you haven't already. And for the rest, yeah, stay safe, be nice, and see you in one of my next videos. Goodbye.